نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Today, inshallah, we'll go over a few hadith from the compilation of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which reminds us that things are not what they appear to be. The hadith, they remind us that things don't appear as they look or as they appear. One hadith that comes to mind is regarding the system, the current system, the economic system placed throughout the world, at least in majority countries, which is capitalism. You work hard, you earn a living, and after all of that, the message that is given is that you are free. You have this freedom. And when we compare it to certain societies, such as communism or other restrictive societies, it appears to make sense. But when we compare it to the hereafter, this theory that capitalism, working hard, earning a living constantly, even Westerners call it the rat race. When you think of the rat race, what comes to mind is initially freedom. You're free to go work, earn a living, save it, hope for a brighter future. And these are all good things. But again, it depends on what we are comparing it to. Are we comparing it to other societies which are restrictive? Or are we trying to get an understanding in relation to the hereafter? So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam informs us that the Isa, Abdul Dinar, wa Abdul Dirham, wa Abdul Khamisa, that the servant of the dirham and the dinar is cursed, meaning this type of person is frustrated at all times. Such a person is happy when they receive, and when they don't receive, they are extremely frustrated. In أعطي رضي وإن لم يعطى سخط. So, what we're trying to remind ourselves today is that things don't appear as they look to us. Sometimes when we look in the car mirror, it says objects in mirror are closer than they appear. This is a very famous print on all of our cars, on the rear view mirror. So this is one we just went over in regards to a person who has allowed themselves to become the servant of the system. When you become a servant of the system, it ties you down, it chains you down to such an extent that removing yourself from it becomes extremely difficult. There are even non-Muslims who are attempting to escape the rat race. They are looking for a more simplistic life, a minimalist life. These are things which even the non-Muslims are striving for. Another hadith that reminds us that things are not as they appear to us is, for example, ad-dunya sijnul mu'min wa jannatul kafir. This is something that we heard all the time, right? That the world is a prison for the believer, and and heaven on earth for the disbeliever. So when we look at this hadith a little further, at Dunya's Sijnul Mu'min wa Jannatul Kafir, we can understand that in comparison, of course there are many affluent, well-off Muslims in this world, and there are many kuffar who are experiencing extreme poverty, right? Most of the people on the corner who have a sign requesting assistance, requesting help, they are, majority of the time, 99.9% of them on the corner are kuffar. So how do you make sense of this hadith when we see affluence in the Muslim community and poverty in the non-Muslim community? So we can make sense of it by saying that and understanding that whatever pleasures and luxuries we as Muslims are experiencing in this world, there is no comparison to the luxuries and the pleasures that await us in the hereafter. And the suffering that a disbeliever is experiencing in this world, it is no comparison to the suffering that awaits in the hereafter because of the kufr, the disbelief. So we can make sense of this hadith in that manner. Another hadith that reminds us regarding our perception of this world is that the concept known as alive but dead, dead but alive. The hadith which reminds us of this is that مثل الذي يذكر ربه والذي لا يذكر ربه مثل الحي والميت. That the individual who remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the one who does not remember, make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is like the living and the dead. So there's two perceptions to this hadith. One is that when we as religious individuals, we attempt to confine ourselves to the five, for example, the 5-time daily salats. When we look at it as a believer, we look forward to our daily salats. We look forward to taking some time out, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes for each salah, and we are engaged, we're happy to do so. But the non-Muslim community, they might look at us like, what a difficult religion. You have to constantly, 5 times a day you have to worship. The non-Muslim community will say we barely have one Saturday or we barely have one Sunday in the week. And if we don't go weekly, we go on special occasions such as Easter or Christmas or Thanksgiving, maybe once or twice or 3 times a year. So when we look at مثل الذي يذكر ربه والذي لا يذكر ربه مثل الحي والميت, to the non-Muslim community, it might appear to them that the Muslims are, what type of life are we living? There's no enjoyment in it. But to us, it's something that we look forward to in the morning, looking forward to waking up for Salatul Fajr. Looking forward to now, of course, the next prayer, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. This is something that we as believers, we look forward to. Another reminder, this is in the Quran, that things don't appear as they seem. Things don't appear as they seem. And this is again regarding the dead and the living. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. Regarding the martyrs, Regarding the martyrs, maybe to the non-Muslim community, it will appear that they have been eliminated and they have died and they are no more. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that the martyrs are alive and well in the hereafter. They are truly enjoying their success. Not only are they enjoying their success, the martyrs are the ones that wish in the hereafter that they could constantly repeat what they experienced at the final moments on earth. Shuhada are the ones who will yearn and desire that I wish I can go back and experience my final moments, my final seconds on earth. And that's why we make the dua, Allahumma rzuqna shahadatan fi sabilik. Another thing we remind ourselves today regarding things that they don't appear as they seem is Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam reminds us regarding individuals who are wealthy but they are poor, or they are poor but they are wealthy. ليس الغنى عن كثرة العرض ولكن الغنى غنى النفس. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam reminds us that wealth is not something that you increase you increase yourself in wealth and material possessions. This is not what wealth is thought of. This is not the theory of wealth according to Islam, according to the Sunnah. But rather, wealth is when a person can achieve contentment of heart, that you're happy with what you have. That's the true reality of wealth. And this is, even in our day and age, if we look at the biggest shift in wealth in modern history is happening right before our very eyes, and that's in the form, think of World War I, World War II happened. Most of us might have not been alive at that time. But after World War I, World War II, the veterans who came back from the wars, they had children, and those children were labeled as baby boomers. Baby boomers began working in the age of the greatest industrial revolution in human history. Working through that era, they compiled mass fortunes. Mass fortunes have been compiled and saved, and now baby boomers are slowly dying off, and they are transferring that wealth to their children, their grandchildren. These children and grandchildren are known as millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, whatever you want to call it nowadays. Basically, the generation that had to work the hardest for their wealth are transferring it to a generation who has to work the least for their wealth. So in this day and age, and what the shift is happening right now, you're talking about trillions of dollars is being transferred in wealth. So one individual from the millennials mentioned that, and they just happen to inherit millions, if not billions, in inheritance. And they mentioned, and these are articles online, you can find it, they mentioned that being rich is extremely boring. Being rich, this millennial is saying, he must be 18 something, maybe 20s, that being rich is extremely boring. There's nothing to look forward to. In fact, wealth creates even further problems. And the best example that wealth creates problems is just look at lottery winners. The highest suicide rate is found amongst the individuals who suddenly hit riches. The mega millions, and all of these things are right before our eyes. We see it every single day on the billboards when we're driving around, when we're driving to work. The advertisements are there on the radio, on the TV. Play the mega millions. If you don't play, you're not going to win. 300 million, 400 million, 500 million. They try to entice you and confuse you, and they try to get you locked up into the web. So we always look to the Sunnah for comfort. Of course, we're all human beings. Shaitan will sometimes get the best of us, try to confuse us. We might be simply at the gas station, and Shaitan will come and whisper that just buy a $1 ticket, Mega Millions. Many people have mentioned they see the scratch-offs. They see the $1 tickets at the cash register. All they have to do is tell their clerk, can you give me one? Extremely challenging. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from falling into these desires and the confusion that waswasa shaitan creates in our hearts and minds. We look at this hadith that wealth is not that you create an abundance in wealth, but rather true wealth is when you have contentment and you're happy with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. Few more reminders regarding our subject today, that things don't appear as they seem, is that a person is knowledgeable yet ignorant. A person is knowledgeable yet ignorant. And the verse in the Quran that reminds us of this concept is إِنَّمَا التَّوْبَةُ عَلَى اللَّهِ لِلَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ السُّوءَ بِجَهَالَةٍ. If we look at this verse, we will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that the tawbah, repentance, is accepted from a person who made a sin ignorantly. بِجَهَالَةٍ ثُمَّ يَتُوبُونَ. Then they made tawbah. So, the common interpretation, simple English, is that, and you can open some translations of the Quran, you'll see that the translation that's made in some of these translations is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only accepts tawbah from a person who sinned unknowingly. This is a wrong translation. Rather, the Mufassirun, and you can open up Ma'arif al-Quran, which is available to the general public. Mufti Shafi Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi wrote it, very beautiful. It's available in many, many languages. This verse, if we study it, the real translation and the tafsir of this verse, إِنَّمَا التَّوْبَةُ عَلَى اللَّهِ لِلَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ السُّوءَ بِجَهَالَةٍ ثُمَّ يَتُوبُونَ, is not that tawbah is only accepted from a person who committed a sin unknowingly, but the tafsir and tarjuma of this verse is that when a person sins, knowingly they're sinning, and then they make tawbah, the tafsir of this is that a person has committed such an act which has made a knowledgeable person a jahil, meaning that you know it's a sin. Without a doubt, you know it's a sin, you committed it, then you're making a tawbah. Basically, you're proving to yourself and to everyone who witnessed that sin that you are a jahil. You are an ignorant person, even though you might be knowledgeable, even though you might have degrees that fill the wall. So all of us are guilty of that, because obviously we know that all of us are individuals who sin. And this verse gives us that confirmation that when we do sin, and every single human being will sin, when we indulge and we commit a sin, we are proving to ourselves that we are an ignorant person. So again, it goes back to that knowledgeable yet ignorant. One other thing we might maybe as some humor is someone who is married yet they are single. Someone who is married yet they are single. Is that a person, a man, he wants to take a second wife. And I'm sure it came across every single male's mind that they want to practice the sunnah. They want to take a second wife. But then what happens when they take the second wife? The responsibilities that are associated now on this husband to treat both wives equally, treat them fulfilling all of their rights and responsibilities. What happens now is that the husband neglects the first wife. More than likely the husband is neglecting the first wife to such an extent that now the first wife, even though she might be married, because nothing is being fulfilled, her rights are not being fulfilled by the husband is now focused so much on the second wife that the first wife, even though she is married, it appears as if though she's single. The husband doesn't frequent her anymore, doesn't visit her, doesn't fulfill her rights and obligations. And finally we conclude that this theory is alive in our times and will be thriving near the Day of Judgment, that things don't appear as they seem, is the era of Dajjal. The era of Dajjal, we know in the Hadith, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam reminded us that Dajjal will have Jannah and Jahannam, right hand and left hand. What is considered his Jannah is in reality Jahannam. And what is considered his Jahannam is in reality the true Jannah. And in that era, the Dajjal era, another common theme will be that a person who is considered a liar will be considered a truthful person, and a truthful, honest, ethical person will be considered a liar. So these small reminders today remind us that things don't always appear as they seem. We went over some of them. I'll just go over really quickly. Is in regards to alive but dead, and dead but alive. We went over some examples of wealthy but poor, knowledgeable yet ignorant, married yet single. These were some of the reminders that we covered today. And again, we reminded ourselves through Quran and Hadith. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be on the right side throughout history. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow for our future generations always to be on haqq as well. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
You guys are all baby boom.
Huh?
You guys are baby boom.
Yeah, actually, we both.
Turn the